12 stone constructions, 5 continents, thousands of years separating them. And archaeologists keep finding the same things, the same orientations, the same geometric logic, the same obsession with the sky. People who could not have met, could not have spoken, could not have traded blueprints building the same way in the Sahara, on a remote rock in the Pacific, in the Scottish Outer Hebrides, in the high Andes, and on a Turkish hillside that was already ancient before Stonehenge broke ground. That is not coincidence. That is a pattern, and patterns demand explanations. Here are 12 of them. Look carefully. If you value documented, deeply researched prehistoric history like this, subscribe right now. It is the single best way to support the work we do here. Drop a comment telling us which city you are hearing this from. We are global, and we want to know. This script is researched and factual, drawing from peer-reviewed sources, including the Journal of Anthropological Archaeology's landmark 1998 paper by Fred Wendorf and Romuald Schild titled Nabta Playa and Its Role in Northeastern African Prehistory, a paper that fundamentally changed what we thought we knew about organized human society in Africa. And from the Cambridge Archaeological Journal's 2024 publication, Representations of Calendars in Time at Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe. Support an astronomical interpretation of their symbolism, by Martin Sweatman, published online in July of 2024, which extended the astronomical reading of pillar symbols into a full lunisolar calendar system older than any previously known. These are not casual sources, these are the receipts. Now back to the information. Number 1, Göbekli Tepe, southeastern Turkey, approximately 9,500 BCE. You cannot start this list anywhere else. This is the oldest known ceremonial stone construction on Earth. Not a burial, not a city. A temple built by hunter-gatherers who had not yet planted a single seed of wheat on a hilltop in what is now the Şanlıurfa province of Turkey. Archaeologist Klaus Schmidt of the German Archaeological Institute began serious excavation there in 1994, and what came out of that hillside rewrote the textbooks. More than 20 circular enclosures have been identified, though only a fraction of the site has been excavated. Massive T-shaped limestone pillars, some of them standing 5.5 meters tall and weighing up to 10 tons. Carved into those pillars, foxes, vultures, scorpions, crocodiles, headless human figures, and abstract belt and buckle symbols so consistent across structures they suggest a standardized symbolic language. The belt and buckle motif is so precise and repeated that Schmidt himself, before his death in 2014, argued these carvings represented a class of being, not animals, not ordinary humans, but entities the builders feared or worshipped. Carbon-14 dating of organic material from the fill confirmed construction phases running from approximately 9,500 BCE through 8,000 BCE. That makes Göbekli Tepe roughly 11,500 years old. It predates Stonehenge by 7,000 years. It predates the Egyptian pyramids by more than 6,000 years. The people building it had no pottery, no metallurgy, no cities. The conventional story, that complex organized structures require a complex organized society with agriculture, hierarchy, and surplus food, collapsed when they found Göbekli Tepe. E.B. Banning of the University of Toronto argued in a 2011 paper in Current Anthropology that Göbekli Tepe might be a domestic site rather than a purely ritual one. The mainstream response, including from Klaus Schmidt's own team, was that the evidence for feasting, communal assembly, and the sheer monumental investment rules out purely domestic use. This was a place people traveled to. Thousands of animal bones were found in the fill, gazelle, wild boar, fox, crane, representing mass feasting events. People across a wide region converged on this hilltop to do something together, and they built in stone so it would last. Martin Sweatman's team at the University of Edinburgh published work in 2024 in the Cambridge Archaeological Journal showing that V-shaped symbols on Pillar 43 in Enclosure D encode a lunisolar calendar system using 11 epigomenal days, the oldest known example of its kind in the history of our species. The enclosures themselves were shown to be oriented towards specific star rise points. Enclosure D faces the setting point of Deneb and Cygnus, calibrated to around 9000 BCE. Enclosure F aligns to the sun on the harvest festival, halfway between the summer solstice and the autumn equinox. The site wasn't just built to impress, it was built to watch the sky. Then someone buried it, deliberately. All 4 primary enclosures were filled with rubble, animal bones, and flint tools, and sealed shut around 8000 BCE. Nobody knows why. That is where we start. Number 2. Karahan Tepe, Turkey, approximately 9,400 BCE to 8,200 BCE, 20 miles southeast of Göbekli Tepe. In the same Taş Tepeler, or Stone Hills region of southern Turkey, sits Karahan Tepe, first documented in 1997 by archaeologist Bahattin Çelik. Excavation there began only in 2019. What came out immediately was staggering. Hundreds of T-shaped pillars, sunken bedrock pits, a unique statue room filled with carved phallus column hybrids. And one detail that made international headlines in 2021, Hugh Newman and researcher J.J. Ainsworth documented a winter solstice sunrise phenomenon in which the sun, at 7:57 in the morning on the 21st of December, penetrates the structure and illuminates a carved stone human head in what researchers call the Pillar Shrine, structure AB. Astronomical calculations published in a 2024 paper in the same Tash Tepler Project archive showed that this alignment would have been precise around 9000 BCE. That makes it the oldest known winter solstice alignment on Earth, 7,000 years older than Stonehenge's famous summer solstice axis. Two sites, 20 miles apart, same hilltop culture, same obsession with the sky, same T-shaped pillar grammar, one design language, two builders. Number 3, Nabta Playa, Nubian Desert, southern Egypt. Approximately 5000 BCE to 4000 BCE. This one almost got missed. In 1974, Southern Methodist University professor Fred Wendorf was returning from an expedition through Libya when his group noticed potsherds and stone fragments protruding from the desert sand about 100 kilometers west of Abu Simbel, 700 miles south of the Great Pyramid of Giza, in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. Wendorf and his team went back repeatedly. What they found, published first in a major study in Nature in April of 1998, was a stone circle roughly 4 meters in diameter, made of 4 pairs of larger stones arranged around an axis aligned to summer solstice sunrise and to a north-south line. Inside the circle, 2 rows of 3 stones. Around the broader site, 5 lines of megaliths stretching for approximately 2,500 meters. And under a central stone platform, the complete articulated skeleton of a cow. The site dates to between 7,500 years ago for its earliest occupation. It intensifies between 6,100 and 5,600 BCE, when the megaliths were most heavily constructed. That is 2,000 years before Stonehenge's first phase. University of Colorado archaeoastronomer J. McKim Malville conducted satellite-aided survey of the site and found that 3 of the radial stone alignments point to Arcturus, a 4th links with Sirius and Alpha Centauri, and a 5th aligns with Alnilam in Orion's belt, all calibrated to 5th millennium BCE positions. 2 stone pairs in the calendar circle align north-south, 2 align east-west, precise cardinal directions in the Sahara 5,000 years before our era. The design grammar, circle, cardinal alignment, sky tracking, ceremonial burial at center, matches what shows up in Stonehenge and Kallanish and Karnak, Africa, Europe, no ships between them. Number 4, Hagar Kim and the megalithic temples of Malta, approximately 3,200 BCE to 2,500 BCE. 36 kilometers south of Valletta, on a limestone ridge above the Mediterranean, sits Hagar Kim, which translates from Maltese as standing stones. UNESCO declared it a World Heritage Site. Radiocarbon dating puts the earliest phases of the Maltese temple complex around 3,600 BCE, making Malta's temples the oldest freestanding stone structures in the world, as of current dating, older than Stonehenge's Sarsen Ring, older than the Egyptian pyramids. The structures use a characteristic trefoil, or cloverleaf, floor plan. Massive limestone blocks, some exceeding 20 tons, fitted without mortar, using a technique researchers have called coralline limestone jigsaw. The largest single stone in the complex is 7 meters long. The entrance of Hagar Kim faces the summer solstice sunrise. On the equinoxes, light enters a specific window in the structure and illuminates a circular disk, a solar phenomenon documented by researcher Ajay. Cox and Tone Lomsdalen in a 2010 paper published in the Mediterranean Archaeology and Archaeometry Journal. The nearby temple of Menajdra, just 500 meters from Hagar Kim on the same coastal ridge, is even more precisely aligned. Its south temple tracks the equinoxes through doorways that flood with light on the mornings of March 20th and September 22nd, while its north doorway marks the summer solstice, and its south doorway marks the winter solstice. 3 solar events encoded in a single structure smaller than a tennis court, using stone-on-stone contact tolerances measured in millimeters, built 5,600 years ago on a Mediterranean island. The site is now protected under a tent structure erected in 2009 by Heritage Malta, precisely because the limestone was deteriorating from tourism and weather exposure. Malta is a tiny island in the central Mediterranean. The people who built these temples left no writing, no clear successor civilization, no explanation. They vanished around 2300 BCE. Their architecture was not replicated locally. It appears fully formed from a culture that appears and disappears from the archaeological record in a span of roughly 1,300 years. 1,300 years. That is the same amount of time separating us from Charlemagne. An entire high civilization of stone-building sky watchers rose and vanished on a small island, and we still do not know where they came from. Number 5. Newgrange, Boyne Valley, Ireland, approximately 3,200 BCE. County Meath, 45 miles north of Dublin. A mound 100 meters in diameter and over 12 meters high, built with approximately 200,000 tons of stone and earth. Inside it, a 60-meter stone passage leading to a cruciform chamber, and above the entrance, a deliberate gap called a roof box, a window built with no practical structural purpose other than one. On the morning of the winter solstice, for approximately 17 minutes, a beam of sunlight travels the entire length of that 60-meter passage and illuminates the back wall of the inner chamber. It works every year. Its ancient Gaelic name, Anuam Grain, means Cave of the Sun. Newgrange was built around 3,200 BCE, which is more than 5,000 years ago. The passage is aligned precisely to within 1 degree of the winter solstice sunrise. Researchers, including Clive Ruggles of the University of Leicester, have confirmed this is not coincidence. 2 nearby sites, Douth and Noath, track the winter solstice sunset and the equinoxes, respectively. They form a 3-part astronomical calendar complex on a single ridge, all within a kilometer of each other. The curbstones surrounding the mound are engraved with spiral, diamond, and lozenge carvings. Some of those curbstones were reused from an earlier structure, meaning there was something there before Newgrange that has not been found yet. Whatever it was already old when they took it apart to build this one. Number 6, Stonehenge, Wiltshire, England, approximately 3,100 BCE to 1,500 BCE. You know the image? You may not know the details. Stonehenge was not built once, it was built over approximately 1,600 years in multiple overlapping phases. The earliest phase, around 3,100 BCE, was a circular earthwork ditch with post holes, possibly wooden. The famous bluestones, 80 of them, each weighing between 2 and 5 tons, were transported from the Preseli Hills in Wales, approximately 250 miles away. The larger sarsen stones, some weighing 25 tons, came from Marlborough Downs, about 25 miles north. The lintels are locked to the uprights using mortise and tenon joints, a carpentry technique applied to stone, documented explicitly in a 2024 book by archaeoastronomers Clive Ruggles and Amanda Chadbourne, published by Liverpool University Press for Historic England, titled Sighting the Sun, nominated for the Current Archaeology Awards 2025 Book of the Year. The main axis of Stonehenge aligns to the summer solstice sunrise and the winter solstice sunset. Research published in 2024 by Fernando Silva, Amanda Chadbourne, and Eric Ellingson in The Conversation also confirmed that the monument may have encoded lunar standstill alignments, specifically the 18.6-year lunar cycle, alongside its solar calendar function. Nearby, at Durrington Walls, pig bones excavated and studied by Mike Parker Pearson of the University of Sheffield showed slaughter dates of December and January, confirming this was a winter gathering site. Stonehenge may have been oriented to the winter solstice from its earliest phase, a calendar, a clock, a gathering point built by multiple generations across 15 centuries. If you are still listening and you have not subscribed yet, now is the time. This research takes real work to do right. Subscribe and tell us in the comments which city you are joining from. We read every single one. Number 7, Carnac, Brittany, France, approximately 4,500 BCE to 3,300 BCE. One town in northwest France, 10,000 acres of stone. The Carnac alignments consist of approximately 2,935 standing stones arranged in parallel rows stretching over 4 kilometers, making them the largest collection of standing stones in the world. The 3 main alignment groups are called Lemenic, Kermario, and Kerleskin. Lemenic alone has 11 rows of menhirs, ending in a stone oval enclosure containing 70 stones. Kermario has 10 rows with 1,029 surviving menhirs, many over 3 meters tall. Carbon dating places the construction of the granite menhirs around 6,000 years ago, a millennium before Stonehenge's stone phase. The stone used is granite sourced from local outcrops, with the largest menhirs weighing several tons each. Moving them required organized labor and planning on a scale that implies a population center nearby. And the Carnac coast of Brittany was exactly that, a densely populated Neolithic zone with evidence of long-term habitation dating to at least 5,000 BCE. Researcher Dimitri Dendrinos of the University of Kansas published analysis in multiple papers examining Lemenic's stone rows and argued they are not parallel straight lines but converging arcs, effectively functioning as geometric projections, what he called a Neolithic proto-computational device for tracking celestial cycles. Whether or not one accepts that framing, the empirical fact stands: the alignments are oriented to solar events. The Krukuno Quadrilateral, a rectangular megalithic enclosure in the same Carnac area dating to approximately 4,000 BCE, has its corners aligned to the winter and summer solstices. The island of Gavrinas, in the Morbihan Gulf just offshore from the Carnac coast, holds a passage tomb whose winter solstice sunrise beam enters the chamber and illuminates the back wall in a beam that also, every 18.6 years, receives moonlight at the major lunar standstill. The builders of Karnak knew the 18.6-year lunar cycle. In Brittany, around 4000 BCE. Number 8, Callanish, Isle of Lewis, Outer Hebrides, Scotland, approximately 2900 BCE, the very edge of the known Neolithic world. The Isle of Lewis sits west of the Scottish mainland in the North Atlantic, battered by wind and sea. Around 2900 BCE, somebody quarried local Lewisian gneiss, some of the oldest rock on Earth, approximately 3 billion years old, and erected what is now called the Callanish Stones, one of the most complex stone arrangements in the British Isles. The central stone stands nearly 5 meters high. Surrounding it is a 13-stone ring, roughly 11 meters in diameter. From that central circle, 4 avenues of stones extend in a rough cruciform pattern, north, south, east, and west. The northern avenue is the longest, approximately 83 meters, and aligns to the north celestial pole. A passage tomb sits within the central ring. The south-pointing row and the stone circle align to lunar phenomena, specifically the major lunar standstill, when the moon rises and sets at its most extreme position on the horizon, a cycle that completes every 18.6 years. At Callanish, during the major lunar standstill, the full moon grazes the tops of the southern hills of the island and appears to roll along the horizon before setting through the central stone ring. Local oral traditions on Lewis, preserved into the early modern period, refer to the stones as the place where the Shining One walks, a phrase recorded by antiquarian Martin, who visited the Outer Hebrides in 1703. Archaeoastronomer Liz Henty of the University of the Highlands and Islands documented in 2014 that recumbent stone circles across northeast Scotland, numbering approximately 80 sites, typically feature 11 or 12 stones and also relate to the lunar cycle. 11 or 12 stones, the same number encoded in Göbekli Tepe's 11-pillar enclosures, the same lunar cycle count that shows up in Karahan Tepe's 11-pillar pool structure, the same 18.6-year window tracked at Karnak's Gavrini's tomb in Turkey, in the Outer Hebrides, in Brittany. Hunter-gatherers and early farmers separated by thousands of miles counting the same thing. Number 9. Sacsayhuaman, Cusco, Peru, approximately 1300 CE to 1400 CE, but built on ground that carries much older memory. 3 kilometers north of the city of Cusco, at an elevation of 3,700 meters above sea level, sits Sacsayhuaman. Its most dramatic feature is a series of 3 colossal terraced walls in zigzag formation, built of limestone and andesite blocks, some of them weighing more than 100 tons. The joints between these stones are fitted so precisely that a piece of paper cannot be inserted between them. No mortar. The Inca construction phase dates to around the mid-14th century CE under Inca Pachacuti, though oral traditions and some architectural analysis suggest the site incorporated much older foundations. What consistently strikes archaeologists and engineers who study it is the polygonal masonry technique. Irregularly shaped blocks, each one uniquely cut to interlock with its neighbor, so that no 2 joints align, and the whole structure resists seismic stress. This is earthquake engineering. Cusco sits in an active seismic zone, and this wall has survived repeated earthquakes that toppled colonial Spanish construction built on the same ground. But here is what opens the door to that global design question. This exact polygonal masonry technique appears on Easter Island's Ahu Vinapu platform wall, some 3,700 kilometers west, across the Pacific Ocean. Number 10, Ahu Vinapu and the Rapa Nui Ahu platforms. Easter Island, approximately 13th to 16th century CE. Rapa Nui is the most isolated inhabited island on Earth, 2,300 kilometers from the nearest populated land. Between the 13th and 16th centuries CE, the Rapa Nui people, who arrived on the island around 1200 CE, constructed over 300 megalithic platforms, called Ahu, and nearly 1,000 stone figures called Moai, carved from the volcanic tuff of the Rano Raraku quarry. The average Moai stands 4 meters tall and weighs approximately 9 to 11 tons. The heaviest known completed Moai weighs approximately 95 tons. A study published in PLOS ONE in 2024, using a high-resolution 3-dimensional model of Rano Raraku, built from 11,000 overlapping drone photographs, identified 426 Moai in various states of completion, 341 quarrying trenches, and 133 extraction voids. Research published in Antiquity in 2025 by Professors Paul Wallen and Helene Martinson-Wallen of Uppsala University showed that Rapa Nui was not the passive recipient of Polynesian cultural traditions, but an active innovator, that the complex Ahu temple platforms emerged first on Rapa Nui and then diffused back westward through maritime trade networks to other Polynesian islands. The Moai walked. A 2025 study published in the Journal of Archaeological Science confirmed experimental validation of the walking Moai hypothesis, that the statues were designed with wide D-shaped bases and a forward lean specifically to allow a team of approximately 18 people to transport them vertically using rope teams, covering 100 meters in 40 minutes, using the statue's own center of mass as the engine. Roads, 4.5 meters wide with concave cross-sections, were built specifically for this method. But at Ahuvinapu, one of the oldest platforms on the island, a wall was built using a technique that Thor Heyerdahl, the Norwegian archaeologist and adventurer who led the first scientific expedition to Easter Island in 1955 to 1956, documented as identical to the polygonal masonry of Sacsayhuaman. American archaeologist William Molloy investigated the site in 1958 and described the main wall as consisting of large basalt slabs fitted together with rounded edges, without mortar, with small triangular stones filling gaps. The wall faces winter solstice sunrise, 3,700 kilometers from Peru. Same technique, same sky orientation. Number 11, Pumapunku, Tiwanaku, Bolivia, approximately 500 CE to 1,100 CE. At an altitude of 3,825 meters above sea level on the Bolivian Altiplano, near the southern shore of Lake Titicaca, lies Pumapunku, Gateway of the Puma in Aymara. It is part of the broader Tiwanaku site, one of the most significant pre-Inca centers in the Andes. The construction at Pumapunku involves red sandstone blocks and gray andesite blocks. The andesite was quarried from a source approximately 90 kilometers away across Lake Titicaca, meaning the stones were transported by water and then up the Altiplano. What has defied conventional understanding is not the size alone, but the precision. The H blocks, a repeated modular unit found throughout the site, are identical in dimension to tolerances measured at less than 1 millimeter. A 2013 report by archaeologist Alexei Vranich of the University of Pennsylvania, working with the Bolivian government's Ministry of Cultures, confirmed that the site's largest stone block is 7.81 meters long, 5.17 meters wide, approximately 1.07 meters thick, and is estimated to weigh 131 metric tons. The precision cuts in the andesite include 90-degree angles, flat surfaces, and interlocking geometric grooves that function as structural keys. No tool marks from metal implements had been found. The builders had stone and bronze tools and achieved sub-millimeter consistency across massive andesite faces. How they cut it remains genuinely unresolved. The H-blocks suggest modular prefabricated construction, a repeated unit assembled on site. Modular prefabrication in 600 CE in the Andes at altitude with stone tools. Number 12. The Senegambian stone circles, Gambia and Senegal, approximately 200 CE to 1100 CE. Almost nobody talks about these. In a region of West Africa covering a modern Gambia and the Casamance region of Senegal, there are more than 1,000 individual stone circles spread across a landscape roughly 350 kilometers east to west and 100 kilometers north to south. Together, they form one of the largest groupings of megalithic structures on Earth, designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2006. The circles consist of laterite pillars, a hard, iron-rich rock common to the region's laterite plateau, ranging from 1 to 2.5 meters in height, arranged in rings of 10 to 24 stones. They were associated with burials. Excavations of graves beneath and around the circles have found iron objects, pottery, gold ornaments, and copper rings, placing the primary construction period between roughly 200 CE and 1100 CE. Over 5,000 individual structures have been identified in the region, and the stone circles number well over 1,000. There are more megalithic circles in this one region of West Africa than in the entire British Isles. Their diameter varies from 4 to 7 meters. That dimension, 4 to 7 meters, is the same general diameter range as the stone circle at Nabta Playa, built 4,000 years earlier and 3,000 kilometers to the northeast. The stones are not merely placed randomly. At the major site of Wasu in Gambia, which contains approximately 11 stone circles in a concentrated area, photographic and survey documentation, submitted in the UNESCO World Heritage nomination file, identified consistent eastward facing of entrance gaps in the circles, suggesting orientation toward the eastern sky at equinox sunrise. The Senegambian circles are also oriented. At sites like Wasu in Gambia, the monuments were positioned with deliberate relation to the rising points of specific celestial bodies. Independent researchers from the University of Dakar have noted eastward orientation patterns, suggesting equinox sunrise alignment across multiple Senegambian sites, published in the African Cultural Astronomy volume, edited by Jarita Holbrook, Rodney Madoop, and Joseph Arama in 2008. The builders of these circles lived in West Africa between the 3rd and 12th centuries CE. They had iron tools. Their graves contain iron objects. They left no written explanation. The circles remain in use today in local spiritual traditions: stone, sky, death, ritual. 13,000 kilometers from Turkey, the same sentence. 12 constructions: Turkey, Egypt, Malta, Ireland, England, France, Scotland, Peru, Easter Island, Bolivia, West Africa. Cultures separated by ocean, by desert, by thousands of years, by language, by everything. And yet the receipts keep saying the same things. Circles, cardinal alignment, astronomical precision, precision stone fit without mortar, modular construction, solstice and equinox tracking, lunar standstill encoding, burial at center, ritual space facing the sky. Why does this pattern exist? 3 broad explanations exist in mainstream scholarship, and each one carries genuine archaeological weight. The first explanation is independent invention, convergent cultural evolution. Humans everywhere shared the same basic cognitive structure, the same fundamental concerns. When will the rains come? When should we plant? When will the cold end? What happens to us when we die? And how do we anchor our community to something permanent? Stone is the most permanent material available. The sky is the most reliable clock available. Any sufficiently organized human group paying attention long enough lands on the same tool set, stone circles that track the sun and moon. This explanation does not require contact. It requires only that human brains work the same way everywhere, which we know they do. Biologist and evolutionary theorist E.O. Wilson's concept of biophilia, the innate human tendency towards certain types of environmental engagement, has been extended by cognitive archaeologists, including Colin Renfrew of Cambridge, to suggest that certain symbolic and spatial practices emerge across cultures independently because they map onto deep structures of human perception and social need. The archaeoastronomers Clive Ruggles and Michael Hoskin reviewed dozens of prehistoric monument alignments across Europe for the Oxford University Press volume Astronomy Before the Telescope in 1996, and concluded that while the specific stars tracked varied by latitude and culture, the fundamental practice of encoding solar and lunar turning points into permanent stone architecture appears independently in every region where sufficiently settled Neolithic populations existed. The pattern is real. The question is whether the same pattern arising independently across 5 continents is a fully satisfying answer. The second explanation is early long-range contact, maritime and overland networks that predate our written records and were far more extensive than conventional textbooks suggest. Thor Heyerdahl sailed from Peru to Polynesia in 1947 in a balsa raft called the Kon-Tiki, specifically to demonstrate that such contact was possible. His argument was scorned by mainstream archaeology for decades. Then, in 2020, a landmark genetic study published in Nature by Pontus Skoglund, David Reich, and an international team from Harvard Medical School and the Natural History Museum of Denmark confirmed pre-Columbian genetic mixing between Polynesian and South American populations, specifically identifying signals consistent with contact around 1200 CE, near the site of Fatuhiva in the Marquesas Islands. Contact happened. The Ahu Vinapu polygonal masonry wall on Easter Island facing the winter solstice sunrise suddenly looks less like coincidence and more like a calling card from whoever made that contact. And if contact occurred between Polynesia and South America in 1200 CE, it raises the question, what contacts occurred before that between peoples we have not yet identified, across routes we have not yet traced? Maritime archaeology is still a young science. Most of what was built or used on early coastlines has been swallowed by sea level rise since the last ice age, which added over 100 meters of water to global coastlines between 12,000 and 6,000 BCE. We cannot see what happened on those coastlines. We can only read the survivors. The third explanation is that the shared design principles reflect shared mathematical and astronomical truths that impose themselves on any society that takes measurement seriously. If you want to build a structure that tracks the winter solstice consistently enough to be useful as a calendar, the physics of the problem constrains your solution. You need a long passage with a narrow window. You need precision alignment to within fractions of a degree. You need a sighting corridor. You end up with something that looks like Newgrange, like Karahan Tepe's pillar shrine, like Hagar Keem's equinox disk. The problem itself creates the solution. That is not a mystical convergence. That is engineering. The same point applies to the structural choice of interlocking polygonal stonework. If you want to build a massive stone wall on seismically active ground without mortar, and you have the skill to shape individual stones, the optimal engineering solution is exactly what you see at Sacsayhuaman, at Ahu Vinapu, at Pumapunku. Irregular polygonal blocks, each custom fitted to its neighbor, so that the joints are never collinear and the structure can flex without shattering. The problem dictates the answer. None of these 3 explanations is mutually exclusive. Convergent invention probably explains most of it. Real contact explains some of it. The geometry of the problem constrains the rest. But here is what stays cold. Here is what none of those explanations fully settles. In 2024, excavations at Göbekli Tepe's sister site, Karahan Tepe, published in the Turkish Ministry of Culture's Taş Tepeler Project reports, revealed underground rooms containing carved stone benches, phallic columns, and a carved human torso emerging from the floor of a pit. The face was smooth, the ribs were carved. one arm extended outward from the stone. Archaeologist Nekmi Karul of Istanbul University, the project director, described it as a representation of a being emerging from the ground. Birth, death, rebirth coded into the architecture itself. The same theme encoded into Newgrange, where the winter solstice light travels the length of the passage and strikes the back wall of the chamber, inside which human cremated remains were found, in an event that reenacts every year the sun's descent into the earth and its return. The same theme at Nabta Playa, where a cow's skeleton was placed under the central stone in an empty tomb. Death below, sky above, stone holding the two together. In November 2025, a new study published in the journal PLOS One, using the first complete high-resolution three-dimensional photogrammetric model of the Rano Raraku quarry on Easter Island, confirmed what researchers had long suspected, that the entire production chain of the Moai, from initial cutting in the bedrock to final finishing details, remained within individual clan work zones, never moving to a centralized production facility. The making of the statues was decentralized. Independent family groups, independent work zones, and yet the output was culturally unified. Nearly 1,000 statues with the same forward-leaning posture, the same nose, the same elongated ears, the same platforms facing the sea. Independent makers, unified grammar. At Sacsayhuaman, Spanish chronicler Cieza de Leon, writing in approximately 1553 CE, asked the Inca nobles who had built those walls. They told him the stones were put in place by the commands of the god Viracocha, who had caused the stones to walk there by themselves. He asked them how long ago. They said it was before the Inca. Before the Inca. The Inca who built the primary walls in the 14th century CE attributed the foundations to someone who came before them, about whom they knew only legend. 12 sites, 3 possible explanations, 1 unanswered question. In a pit at Karhant Tepe, 9,400 years ago, someone carved a face emerging from the rock and built a window so precise that light would enter it at 7:57 in the morning on the shortest day of the year and illuminate that face. Then, 37 years ago, Hugh Newman and J.J. Ainsworth stood in that pit on the 21st of December and watched it happen. The face was still looking up. The sky had not moved.